Coming up on this edition of Mustangs Corner, we talk to local historian and former Justice of the Peace, Arthur Bea Williams. We'll highlight her experience in Wichita Falls as a citizen, official, and public servant. Stay with us for more. Welcome to a new edition of Mustangs Corner. I'm Trey Jones. Today we have with us Arthur Bea Williams. She is a former Wichita County Justice of the Peace who has also served as Wichita Falls City Councilor at Large, Mayor Pro Tem, and Interim Mayor. She was the first Black woman to be elected to the public office in Wichita Falls. She has been inducted into the North Texas Women's Hall of Fame and was named 2001 Wichitan of the Year. Thank you so much for joining us today, Ms. Williams.
Thank you for asking me.
And I'd like to start off by asking you a little bit about your experience growing up and what was life like for people of color in this city?
Life was no different here than it was anywhere in the country. Even the North had its share of problems. It was extremely segregated, literally a city within a city, because the African Americans lived either on what's now known as the East Side or what was, back when I was a kid, known as the Hill District. It was the servants' quarters. Even though our families didn't work as servants in the houses, they were called servants' quarters, and they lived among the very same people that they worked for, but in little apartments in the back of the houses.
Okay. And could you tell us a little bit about how you started down your career path?
I started off after college. I was a college dropout, and I started off doing the same thing that anybody else would have been doing in the 50s. I was working in private homes or in stores and that sort of thing. In 1958, I heard that the first African-American woman who had been admitted to practice law in Texas was now at a position that she wanted to have a secretary, so I applied for her job, for that job, and got it. I thought that perhaps I could work a little and get enough money to go back to college and finish my degree, and I worked for her for 13 years. And then I went to work at the county courthouse, working for the senior district judge there, which was the first time that they had an African American working in an office there. Right. So I had, as a full-time job. So I did that one until he retired, and went to work at county court, which is part of the commissioner's court, and the juvenile court. And that's that part of the judicial system. And I had always told myself that anytime a job became available, if I thought I was qualified to do it, I would do it. And if I didn't push for myself, nobody else would. So every time a job came available at the courthouse, if I felt that I was capable of doing it, I applied for it. Right. So when the Justice of the Peace job came available, I applied for it thinking that I wouldn't get the job, but I'd get a raise. Right. So they hired me. They hired me to do the JP's job. I had been the mental health coordinator for the state hospital district, which included 52 counties in Texas. I did all of the mental commitments for them, the paperwork, the intake, from start to finish, from Fort Worth to El Paso, not El Paso, Amarillo. So the job as the JP was an appointed position when I first got it. But according to Texas law, if the appointed position that you had, and I'm assuming just the judiciary, was more than 2 years, you had to run for it. So my appointment became effective December 15th, 1983. So that was 2 years and 2 weeks. So I had to run for the job, and I ran and was elected at first in 84. I was sworn in 83, December, but I was elected to the job at the general election in November of 84 and held it until I retired. And then I became a professional do-gooder. That's a volunteer.
Oh, okay.
And I volunteered to do things for Taft Counseling Center, Meals on Wheels, McCutcheon, Child Care Incorporated, anything that I was involved in as a volunteer, I became a physical volunteer. If they needed things done on premises, I did it.
Right.
And there was a big Donnybrook about books at the public library here. When we had our hue and cry on lesbianism and homosexuality, and the books, Daddy's Roommate and Mommy, my mom, Two Mommies or whatever it was, and everybody in town had their hair on fire, and so I went to City Hall to complain about censoring.
Right.
And when I went home, I still ranting and raving, and so my daughter said, "If you don't like it, how they run things down there, why don't you run for public office again?" And so I ran for city council and won.
Wow.
I had 3 opponents at my first time, and I won, and mainly about the book, because my daughter is a librarian here at Midwestern. And so I ran over there ranting and raving, and the thing about being the pro tem probably had more to do with tenure and just outliving everybody, outstaying everybody, but that's how I got involved in it, basically.
Right. And could you, how would you describe that experience that you went through, going through all that?
I like a good fight, so it was fun. It was fun for me.
Right.
I figured nothing ventured, nothing gained. Probably the biggest thing that I had to do was when I made the application for the first job as a JP, because after that, you have to win in order to keep your job. So once I won, and I won by such a big surprise, I thought I was invincible. And so I figured I would get my job as long as I did a good job. And I had no doubt about my ability to do a good job. Still kind of racially charged, though. There were more people than a little bit who would come in the office, and they didn't know who I was, didn't know what I looked like. And so if my door was closed, they'd come in talking about how they were going to beat me at the next time the job was up for grabs in the electric system. And so I just kind of had a good time. I really liked running for public office.
Right.
I didn't think I'd have that kind of flair for public office for myself, but truly, I loved it.
Really?
I suspect victory has a tendency to do that to you.
Yeah, it does. And what would you say your favorite memory is from being a public servant?
Probably it came after, when people who had come before me, and not always on their best day, and not their finest hour, and even where I set some pretty high bonds, thanked me for treating them as though they were human beings and not taking what they had been accused of and determining who they were. And I've had more people than a little bit who stop by. They'll do things for me at my house. You know, if I'm working in the yard, if they think they can help, they'll do it. If I'm at the gas station pumping gas, somebody will come up and say, you know, you had a come to Jesus meeting with me and turn me around, and can I help you? And they just thank me for doing that. And for the young ones, seeing them as human beings and admonishing them to stop doing what they were doing and turn around and get back into doing the right thing and stay out of trouble. Because I had an expression, we could run the courthouse without them. So, you know, keep your nose clean and keep your life clean and you do good things, and a whole bunch of them really have.
Really?
Like doctors and lawyers.
Oh, wow.
That kind of thing.
And what impact did you want to leave on the community working as a public servant?
Mine is I try to follow a path of never refusing to do something for the good of my community. I don't say no if yes is a better answer.
Right.
And so I just say, if you want a town to be a good place to live, then you have to help it be that. Don't ask anybody else to do things for your town that you're not willing to do, and to always volunteer. And when you talk about being in public life, especially if it's where you have to be elected, don't worry about losing. worry about running. You can't win if you don't run. So whenever I wanted to run for something, I just ran, and I just assumed that I would win. And I did a good job, had a flair for it, and ran into a whole bunch of things, but they didn't, it was more somebody else's problem than it was mine.
Right.
'Cause I don't answer to what you call me, I answer to what I decide I am. So it didn't matter what anybody said about me. I was fearless.
Right. And what would you say some of the difficulties were about running your first campaign?
The first time, race, to be real frank with you, race was probably the fact that I was a woman, but since my first name was Arthur, and no woman had run for judgeship before, and I decided that I would not use a picture, because that was at the time that pictures were just being used on political yard signs, and I would not use a picture. My middle name was Beatrice, but instead of using Beatrice, I used B, B-E-A with no period.
Right.
And there was a politician named Bo Bolter. And if I recognize anything, it's human nature. So they voted for Arthur. They thought they were voting for Bo. I know it. I just, in my soul, I know it. So they weren't quite sure who they were voting for, because there was no picture. And I ran a very good campaign, had a good ad manager. As a matter of fact, the campaign was so well run in terms of ads that they actually thought I had hired a New York firm to do it. They were wonderful. I wish you guys could have seen it. It was really, really good. And I have to give a little bit of credit to myself. I ran a darn good campaign.
Right. That's pretty impressive that you kind of like pulled something so clever like that.
Well, you just kind of have to read the tea leaves, and
Right.
I think I recognized that they thought it was Bo. They just couldn't see it, and because most of the time they didn't see me, and I had a lot of ads that were run on TV,
Right.
but men were doing it. Still good psychologically, that women can vouch for men who run for office, and men can vouch for women, and we're all prejudiced in one way or the other.
Right.
And so it just kind of worked. Had a good time.
And how would you say life has changed for people of color in Wichita Falls now?
The ability to run in the places that you can run and do, and not only in politics, the things that you can do are wider, more diverse, but it won't work if you don't participate anyway.
Right.
So I think there are a lot of things to do. You have to know who you are, and you have to feel competent in your ability to do things, and then get out there. I still think that not enough people run for public office, not enough people apply for jobs that are difficult, not because somebody's not going to hire them, it's because they think somebody won't. And so they don't utilize all the things that are available for them. But I don't think that anything should stop anybody anymore.
Right. And what work still needs to be done, looking back on that?
Personally, I wish that as an African American woman, that African American parents would be more consistent with their children to preach a sense of usefulness, of worth, of self-value, and that they would be the biggest champions of their own children.
Right.
I wish they would get more involved in the schools. I still volunteer at a school with elementary children, and I would like to see more parents involved there and to support teaching. My daughter taught for a long time in public schools here before she went to library school, and to back the people who take care of your children, who teach your children, because it sounds cliche-ish, but they really are our future.
Right.
And you kind of, it's, garbage in, garbage out. If you don't do anything to turn them into the wonderful human beings that you want, they're going to be what you turn them into.
Correct.
So it sounds kind of blah, blah, but I think it's correct.
Well, I think it's definitely something that people should know and people should think about looking back on it, especially hearing about all your past experiences. I'm sure it's very good advice for them.
Oh, and I mean, my younger years were not superior by all. I mean, I had a tough time. We were poor in dirt. The expression poor in dirt, we really were.
Right.
I never thought I was dumb. My family didn't think I was dumb, and if brains would get you someplace, I thought I'd go great places. I was going to major in, I wanted to be a doctor, all those fancy things. Turned out that life was not meant to be that way for me.
Right.
But the ride that I had was pretty good.
Well, you had definitely a good one. And sadly, that's all the time we have left today. I want to thank you again for joining us today, Ms. Williams. And it's really been great to have you here.
Well, thank you.
And thank you all for watching. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram, Twitter at MNG Media, and like us on Facebook. From Mustangs Corner, I'm Trey Jones.